Welcome to another episode of the NOAC Godcast. Hope everyone's having a great week. We've got the crew all back together.
Feels like it's been forever.
It does.
It
does. Mm-hmm. I told Jayme I liked the apart but together last week. Mm-hmm. So we were saying from now on she could just be in a different room and we could just talk.
The special guest, but I'm
yeah, she's next door.
So we wouldn't even have to do video though. You'd still hear her.
That's true. That's true. Well, it's officially a new year. It's been a little bit of a running joke in our household, but like Rachel can tell you, I've always loved Christmas. Mm-hmm. I've always been the one that's over and above and beyond Christmas. Love Christmas. This year, not so much. In fact, I've been called a Scrooge this year. But if I were to be completely honest, I've been a lot more excited for the new year than Christmas this year, which I can't ever remember before. That's a little bit odd for me. But I think the reason is I'm excited. I feel like everything last year was just a build up to what this year's going to be.
Yeah.
And so that's exciting. That's an exciting way to approach a new year. That's kind of what I want to talk about a little bit. We are in with our new series this week. And so today's lesson is, what is this, a lesson? What are we even doing here?
This hot mess
is called A Crown Worth Keeping. Is that what it actually is titled? I renamed it about 5 times, so who knows what you're going to read when you click on this, if you click on this. Maybe you won't click on it because the title's awful. I'm at a loss now. But, so I don't know if any of you guys, I don't know if you, I know you.
You did too.
That is your sister. You should know what you're going to say. You should know her.
We haven't actually said anything. I don't know if any of our viewers ever had a hamster growing up. Apparently, we did.
I had a couple. You had one. You remember they fought? We put them in the same cage. Don't do that. That was very bad.
I knew you had one. 8 curtains.
It did.
And died.
It did. It exploded.
But I don't. It exploded curtains everywhere.
Have you ever heard of a hamster dying peacefully?
No.
I guess not.
They always die some weird way.
Yeah.
Moral of the story, folks, don't be a hamster. It's tragic, really. But this is the thing about hamsters. They are very funny little creatures. But one thing that's absolutely definite about a hamster is that they are far from lazy. Would you agree with that? They are not lazy little critters. They may be fat, but they're not lazy, right? And the fact is, if you give a hamster a little wheel in its cage,
squeaks all night long.
It does squeak all night long. Get a plastic cage. But if you give it a cage wheel.
A wheel in the cage.
If you give them a wheel in the cage, they will run as fast and as hard as they possibly can. I mean, to the point of where you're huffing watching them, right? But no matter how hard they run, no matter how many miles they've gone, at the end of their time on the wheel, they have nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
I feel that deeply.
I'm in this conversation. I don't like it.
And even though they're going full speed ahead, even though they're going as hard as they can, they're going nowhere. And the hamster, even though that's true, will get up the next day, do it again.
Yep.
And then the next day, do it again. And run as hard as they can, going nowhere, day in and day out. The next day, and the next day, and the next day. And you get the point. And so the older I get, the more I've come to recognize that a lot of times I feel like that's what we do with our lives. At least I do. I think that a lot of times we wake up and we go through our lives with the mentality of, well, that's what I do, or that's what kind of, it's okay, it's January, this is what I do, or it's the second week of the month, this is what I do, or it's Tuesday, this is, you know what I mean? We just do it because that's what we did yesterday and the day before. We're in a hamster wheel cycle. And so I guess today, all of that, CJ's eyebrows are, I'm really not making sense.
His eyebrows are all the way in his nostrils.
What I'm trying to say, but doing poorly at so, is that we need to step out of the hamster wheel. I've never felt so judged in all of my life. We need to take a step outside of the hamster wheel. There's that familiar hot mess. And we need to evaluate, what are we doing with our lives? And maybe some of y'all are we just need to evaluate what we're doing with our lives. That's really the point today. Because we're running as absolutely hard and fast as we can, and yet we have nothing to show for it. We get up the next day and we start all over, day in and day out, month after month, year after year, wasting our lives on the worthless wheel cycle.
Well, I think a lot for us, a big step in that direction was COVID.
Yeah.
Because when everything came to a halt, we kind of all sat down.
You can't do the normal things.
You can't do it. You don't do it just because it's what it is.
Right.
So when we came back into our lives and we came back to normal church and everything, we're all well, what is important?
Right.
What is going to be still here? What are we going to allow to still happen instead of it just being normal?
Right. And not to be, I don't know, it's that you shouldn't say this, but here it comes. Yeah, not salt in the wound, not throwing aspersions, but a lot of times I think, especially in church, we are well, we have to do that because that's what we've always done. do we see with the hamster?
Yeah.
That makes no sense at all. Nothing is being accomplished. Nothing is glorifying God. It's just a hamster wheel cycle.
Yep.
And I'm not even just talking for the church. Yes, for the church, but even for our own lives. Like, evaluate your life. Is what you're doing worth living for?
Yeah.
Really, we just go through life mindlessly.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, you literally could just turn it off and just keep going and function.
running,
Like,
yeah.
like just don't
Like,
get
have you
it.
guys ever seen like the memes of the you get somewhere and you realize you're like, I don't remember driving.
Yeah.
Like you're sitting in the parking lot.
You should have that checked out. That's a medication for things. Maybe
like-
you're on medication. Maybe that's the problem.
Like, you pull into the parking spot, you turn off your car, and you're like, did I drive here? You know what I mean? Like because you're used to it.
That's slightly worrisome.
Don't worry, there's a whole like group of people that created this meme for it.
I
So
know.
It's fine.
It's like scary world. So I guess that's what the great thing about January is. January is typically like you get Christmas in December, you got turkeys in November. Like January is just that like, okay, reset month, right?
Yes.
We all agree with that. And so that you have something exciting to say.
Nope. Just off.
So with the entire year ahead of us, now is the time to examine what we're living for, I guess is what we're saying. And so what exactly is it that you are running towards? What precisely is your aim? What are you trying to obtain with your life? Because I don't know about you guys, but I'd actually like to have something to show for my life. Like I'd like to not waste it because we endure a lot of exhaustion. We do a lot of things and a lot of effort. I don't want to do that for no reason.
Yeah. Well, you don't feel fulfilled when you're just doing it just for the habit of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I, for one, I'd like to live a life that counts. And so this is the very thing that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 9:25. I really love this verse. It's actually really well known, but I feel like it's kind of like the hamster wheel. It's one of those verses where we don't take the time to step back and actually sink in where we're driving to or what the verse says. And so this is what Paul writes. Every man or woman that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now, they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible crown. And so Paul says that every man or woman strives to be a master in something. Some are memes.
I do have a lot of beams.
Beams.
Beams. My
Her
nose
house
is plugged a
is
little.
filled of the...
It's Bob.
Some people... Everyone has something they master. Everyone has something they're a master of. Everyone has something they're devoting time and life to. Some people it's video games. Some people it's sports. Some people it's memes. Some people it's whatever, a family. Like we all have something we're aiming our lives at. We're striving to be a master of. In Paul's day, so he's writing to the church of Corinth, right? And in Corinth, they had what was called, I'm going to pronounce this horribly. I don't like the spelling of this word. It makes me
I wasn't sure how
uncomfortable.
to say it,
I should have probably looked that up. We're going to go with it. And you guys back me.
Okay, cool.
So they had what was called the, now I really got myself psyched up. They had what was called the Isthmian Games.
Isthmian.
Okay, I see.
Isthmian game.
She, you have a list.
Isthmian
I
games.
can't even say it. Anyhow, they have these games.
I'm just trying to fix it and I can't.
They had what was called the Isthmian Games.
Isthmian.
Which was one of these, it was like an Olympic kind of game. Like they had like chariot races. They had, I don't know if they shot, like they had all these like Olympic style games like you see in ancient Greece or Rome or whatever. And so they had these ancient Olympic like games in their town. Like that's what Corinth was known for, this city. And so literally people from all over the ancient world would train for months, even up to a lifetime in their category, right? That they're going to compete in. And then in fact, if they were going to enter the games, the 10 months before the game started, they were required to endure intense training. So you're giving up months, a lifetime to just basically getting on a hamster wheel, going as hard as you can for this Isthmian Games. And so these athletes would endure fierce and intense physical training. They would spend countless hours and days and months and even years at mastering their talent. These athletes would give up meals.
Why?
I could never be an athlete. They would endure extreme workouts. They would endure transforming their body. They would participate in all of these extreme things, giving up extreme things in order to be in the Isthmian Games. And in other words, what Paul's saying is the price to be in these games is pretty high.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I'm really coming to realize as of late. In church, a lot of times, we talk about surrender. We talk about being willing to sacrifice, and it's like a big no-no or offensive or like we don't have to do that. We can still be a Christian. And yet the same people are willing to sacrifice for their Isthmian games.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, what Paul's saying is every man is a master of something. Every man is willing to sacrifice somewhere. Some are for Jesus, some are for other things.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not what he's saying? Mm-hmm. And so the cost of being in these games, it was high. You had to alter the very way you lived your life, what you ate, where you went, how you spent your free time, who you hung out with, what you aimed your life at had to be altered just to be in these games. But this is the part that's crazy. So after all of the changes you've made to your life, after all the intense training, after finally getting the chance to compete in the coveted competition of the Isthmian Games, if you did all of that, and if you just so happened to be the best of the best and you won in your category, then you possibly had the chance of winning the big prize. The big prize. The big prize. The gold medallion of their day, the biggest of the biggest of the biggest prize for all of this effort. The world's greatest athletes who had sacrificed so much and given up so much and who had conditioned and trained for a lifetime were awarded a little crown of pine needles.
So not only is it not worth anything, but it's also uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that literally, history has this recorded. That is literally what they won. Crunchy, dead pine needle crown.
Yeah, no.
I don't know how many of you guys have a real tree. I don't.
I don't have one.
I barely have a dead tree.
Fake?
Fake one.
There you go. There's another thing.
Well,
It's
the
not
thing
just
is,
live and
my
dead.
fake tree is dying. It's a long thing that's not worth this podcast. But a pine needle crown. That's what they literally gave their life towards. That was it. That was what they won. Yeah. That was the consolation of their conditioning. A crown that would crumble. A crown that would rot, decay, fall to bits.
And your name to be said, but
forgot.
Do you know any of them?
Yeah, exactly right. So imagine giving up your entire life for this one event, and imagine enduring the excruciating and finally competing to fulfill your lifelong dream, and then beating all the odds and actually winning, only to be handed a crunchy, uncomfortable Christmas tree crown.
That sounds like something that we would get handed off at camp.
What I envision. I am offended.
You shouldn't be.
I am offended.
Maybe you should. We probably have one.
I'm still offended. So what I imagine, you've given up all this, you've transformed your body, you've conditioned, you've trained, you've given up your life for this event. You finally win and beat everyone, and they hand you this crunchy, uncomfortable pine noodle crown. What I envision is the little girl with the avocado. You understand?
Yes, the meme.
An avocado.
Thanks.
G. Thanks. Doesn't she say G?
No. It's
I've
an
lived
avocado.
a life.
Thanks.
On the authority of James meme.
James Meme. Twitter name James Meme.
Meme.
Is that my name?
Meme. It is now.
James Meme.
And so this is what Paul's pointing to. He says these men, these women, they knew what they were getting.
Yeah.
Before they entered the race, before they gave up
It's
the
not
meals.
like they were surprised. They got there and they're like, this is all I got.
This is what, no, they knew.
Yeah, that was what they were going for.
That was literally what.
So sad.
But is that not case in point?
Yeah.
Paul says you're living for a corruptible crown with your life.
Yeah.
What is that? It's a crunchy pine needle wreath on your head.
Yep.
That's what you're living for, and you know it. And yet choosing it. That's what Paul's saying here. They knew what they were in it for. They knew in advance, before giving up a bite, before conditioning, before the pain and the training. These athletes knew that they were competing at best for the crusty, crunchy, corruptible crown. Wow. That should have been the title.
That should have been the title.
Clickbait. The crunchy, crusty, corruptible crown.
That is impressive.
That was. I don't even remember what words you used. That was really good.
She's still trying to figure out where she parked at, isn't it?
Did I even drive here?
The girls touched on this last week on the podcast, but I fear that in our modern day Christianity and the folks who listen to this podcast and the churches we grew up in and the lives we live, I fear that we've fallen for this Isthmian game mentality, this hamster wheel mentality. We know that the life we're living towards ends in nothing more than ashes. We know that.
Yeah.
I think you talked about last week with your house or whatever. We know. I love my house and I try to fix it up best I can. I try to clean it, but I know ultimately it's going to be a pile of ash, if not worse. I don't know what's worse than ash, but it's going to be a pile of something not keepable. We know good and well that our house is gonna one day burn up. We know that our sports success, our hobbies, our collections, or whatever mastery that you're striving for, it's going to eventually end up in a pile of ashes as this world fades away. We know that our clothes are going to end up cloth. We know that our clothes are going to end up moth eaten. Wrong off.
My clothes are already cloth.
Mine are cloth.
Moth eaten. Our cars are going to rust. Our bodies are going to break down. Amen. We know that our gold's going to lose its value, right? What are we saying? What we're saying is what we're wasting our lives on, we know is eventually not going to last.
Yeah.
It's a hamster wheel mentality. It's giving a life up for nothing at the end.
Yeah.
And running as hard and fast as you can towards it.
Yeah.
And so a lifetime exchange for a crunchy, crusty, corruptible crown.
Are you going to change the title?
I'm thinking about
I wouldn't know. Yeah.
So what if this year were different? What if this year you refused another single millisecond on the hamster wheel of your life? What if you refused to work for what will be worthless? What if you refused to sacrifice for what will someday fade away? What if you took the time, think about this, what if you took the time and you took the energy and you took the resources and worked and gave all that you had in order to obtain an incorruptible crown, an uncrunchy crown, an uncrustable crown? No, I didn't mean that. What if you are working as hard towards what is keepable in the end of life as you are towards what is unkeepable? What if you chased after Jesus as hard as you chased after that college degree? Or what if you traded your time you put into trick shots into reading God's word? Or what if you spent the time that you spent in front of the TV or in front of video games and you invested it in prayer? What if you thought about Christ as much as you think about that boyfriend or that girlfriend? Is there something you want to tell us? No. Is that a guilty? The problem is that we lack eternal perspective. And I really believe this. All of us. I mean, us three, every Christian. I believe we lack eternal perspective. Paul wrote that all men strive for the mastery. All men sacrifice for something. It's not that we're unwilling to sacrifice. It's that we're willing to sacrifice for what's going to fade away. And we refuse to live a life that's aimed at the eternal.
Yeah.
And so the sobering reality is that there is a true incorruptible crown to obtain in this life for the next. That's what the Bible teaches. There is a crown of life, the Bible says. There's a crown of righteousness. There's a crown of glory. And for those who put their faith and trust in Jesus Christ, they're going to receive this crown. Why? Because at the end of life, we're going to be able to take that crown and we're going to be able to lay it at Jesus' feet and say, I worked my entire life for what I now lay before you. And so this is what I want you to grasp. Before we say, holy, 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 we will cast our crowns at his feet. And how horrifying and how embarrassing it would be and how tragic of a scene it would be if we spent our entire lives for a crusty, crunchy, corruptible crown.
Yeah.
Do you know that Jesus doesn't care so much about your GPA? When you're in heaven and you're before the great white throne and you're before him and everyone's casting crowns, their the crown of life and the crown of righteousness and the crown of glory at Jesus's feet and saying you're worth it all. You can't cast your sporting event. No. You can't cast your bank account.
You can't say, I went to Harvard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I bet you didn't. You can't say that.
I can't say that in general. That would be
See,
a lie.
you cannot say that.
I cannot say that.
But I just feel like knowing those at youth camp, like we watch your lives and we watch our lives and we're like, listen, this is what you're aiming for, but that's going to be crunchy and crusty and corruptible. You can't cast that at Jesus' feet. And so what if we stopped one another? What if we pointed it out? You were going to do that, Rachel. Rachel, now is the time. I have to tell you.
I have to tell you, ma'am. No.
Bam. I have to tell you, bam. Those believers who chased after that which will fade away are going to have nothing to show for it. And this is what I want us to realize. Have an eternal perspective. The Bible doesn't say this, but what if at the end of life, what if you stand before Jesus and everyone's casting their crowns before him? And what if Jesus looked you square in the eyes? And what if Jesus said these words to you? Where's the crown? Was I not worth living your life for?
And that's totally separate from salvation.
Yeah.
This isn't, you're not going to make it into heaven.
Right.
This is just, you're here, you're like, yeah, I made it, I got it, you know, everything's good,
Well,
and then you don't have nothing.
Well, I feel like they'd be grasping for those things, right?
Yeah.
They'd be like,
Be like,
well,
yeah,
I've got. Yeah, like I did all this stuff in my life, and then you were like, listen, just
And it
falls
turns into a crumbled pile of pine needles, right?
and then you're like reaching behind you trying to grab the other guy's stuff.
Give me the crown. Give me the... But like that's serious. That should really be something that we consider. And You remember the parable Jesus gave about the master who invested in his servants the talents, right? He came and he invested the talents in them, but one of them buried it in the sand and basically didn't do anything with what the Lord had given him, the master had given him. And what happened? He was not happy. Yeah. He came back and he was vengeful, and I believe he locked him up. Was that the right parable? That might be the forgiveness parable. Might be mixing parables, but hey, we know memes. But the point being, you're going to give an account for what was given you. What was given you? Life.
Yes.
A crown of life. And so now you have to give that life back to him and lay it at his feet. And so I guess that's the warning today is, what are you aiming towards? What are you using your life for eternally? Because crusty, crunchy, corruptible crowns are not something that Jesus is interested in. What does that look like? It looks like hobbies and sports. It looks like bank accounts. It looks like boyfriend, girlfriend endeavors. It looks like even careers and even education. And I'm not saying any of those things are wrong, or you should not even have any of those. Yeah. But when that is the central focus of your life, when that is the aim of your life, that's a problem.
Well, what people don't realize is if you put it in the right perspective, things, I don't know if I said it here or wherever I said it, but like, so God will give you, like, the whole thing, everybody thinks that they're going to be given whatever they're owed. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're entitled to different things, whatever. But throughout life, you have to understand that God will give you what he wants you to have to fulfill his will. Like, whether that be a nice house, whether that be, you're living in a tent, like whatever the way that God needs you to fulfill his will, that's what he's going to give you. And so if you live your life to have him on top and you're looking for the crowns, the incorruptible crowns, then everything else will fall into line. Right. You will have maybe a good relationship if God wants you to have it. You'll have a nice house, you'll have a good job, but that can't be your priority.
Right, absolutely. And I think there's so many, like, that's totally the biblical example. And that's totally the example Jesus gives. And I guess that's the thing, we're so afraid to give it up, but the fact is he may give it back to you. Yeah. He just has to reprioritize it in your life. And I don't know, I just think that's something we all need to really just, I don't want this to be a podcast where like, yes, this is something every single one of us need. I mean, you should agree with this. That's not what I'm saying.
Don't go jump back on the hamster wheel after listening to
exactly. Like even me, like I've been thinking this week, like what? I really need to think about that. We said this in Sunday school this morning here at the church. And really I've been thinking about this a lot this week. Who is your life all about? If you had a billboard that was your life, who would be on that billboard? Because I fear a lot of us, it might be basketball or football or baseball or wrestling or whatever sport you're in, or it may be your GPA, or it may be that college, or it may be your friends or your boyfriend, it may be your family, it may be your finances. I feel like a lot of us, our billboard, what our life is all about, what we're trying to advertise by the way we live, would not be Jesus. Yeah. And that's what we're talking about. When you get to heaven, you're gonna have nothing to show for your life. Yeah. A wasted life on a crunchy, crusty, crustable. Ooh, I lost it that time.
You did.
A crusty, crunchy, corruptible crown.
There you go.
Now it's your turn.
I feel like it's trained like a children's book. Like
the Hinky Winky Donkey. Is that what we're vibing here?
Every year. No, every time.
Every year it is. Where did I park my car? Okay. So may this year be different. That is our exhortation today. May this year be different. May this be the year that we refuse to live for what will corrupt and crumble and crunch someday. This year in 2022, may we live lives that are conditioning for a crown that will last forever. So today's considerable quote comes from Spurgeon. That's nice unison, guys. So Spurgeon writes this: "There are no crown bearers in heaven who are not cross bearers below." Such a good one. I love it when he just fits in the podcast so well. Today's featured content is a great song by Shane and Shane, one of my favorites. It's called "Worthy of It All." Check it out. Today's Charge Up Challenge, I want you all to draw a target. Do you know what a Target looks like? Like you've heard of the store?
Yeah.
Have you heard of the popcorn place? With popcorn and Starbucks.
And the nice carts.
Yes, they have cup holders in their carts.
And they push nicely. They're not Walmart.
And they even have like a little thing to hold.
Stay with me here. Stay with me. So this is the Charge Up Challenge. Go to Target. No, that's not it. The Charge Up Challenge is to draw a target, which is just circles and circles, on a piece of paper. And over the next week, I want you to pay attention to your thought life. And I want you to pay attention to how you spend your time. And then by the way in which you've lived over the last 7 days, what exactly is that center circle? What exactly would belong there? What exactly is it that you're aiming your life at? Write your answer in that middle target. I think that'd be something great for all of us to do. Yeah. So when I'm back in 3 weeks, whenever you let me come back, Like, I just feel like that's something we all need to do.
You're
Who is
pushing
in
it.
that Target? You're not coming back. They think they're royalty around here or something.
You make the schedule, man.
You make the schedule and you gave us the crowns.
You're blowing my entire facade here. I am the eyes behind the curtain. All right. Well, thank y'all so much. We've had hotter messes.
Yeah.
That was like a contained hot mess.
Yeah.
It was contained.
It's like a pool of lava, not a volcano of lava.
Like someone could avoid it if they wanted to.
Don't say that. So you should cut that part out. That's our slogan for the podcast. The NOIC Godcast. You could avoid it if you want. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Hope you're off to a great week. Have a Merry Christmas. Until next time. We'll see you.
Goodbye.